Welcome to the show, everybody. My name's Ben Callahan, and I'm here with Tim Trudeau, the one and only. How are you doing this morning, Tim?
Doing well, thanks. After getting dug out after this big snowstorm.
This snowstorm, one last event for 2020. What a year it's been. Um, we're doing a podcast, which is pretty exciting. This is kind of my brainchild, and the idea here is just to uh, get more of your thoughts recorded for the good of the masses. So, we're excited. We're pretty excited about this. Today, because it's the end of the year, we're going to be talking about New Year's resolutions, specifically New Year's uh, going from 2020 to 2021, because 2020 was a heck of a year, and we're looking forward to what's probably going to be a different year. Um, so just to warm the people up a little bit, Tim, what do you usually do during New Year's time? Are you a resolution guy or not so much?
Yeah, most years I make resolutions. I'd say almost every year I've made resolutions, and just like most people, I've kept fewer resolutions than I've made.
Yep, yep, yep. Would you say that how long does your average resolution live? Like March or June or farther than that?
Well, depends on the area. If it's exercise, usually shorter than that. If it's scripture reading, sometimes longer than that.
Yeah, yeah,
Some areas I find it easier to stay disciplined than other areas.
yeah.
Eating, don't find it as easy to stay disciplined in eating. So
Well, Easter rolls around, and
yeah.
the temptation is a lot greater. Um, how do you how do you go about that process? How do you reflect on the previous year, and how do you look forward into the next year?
Well, sometimes it's more formal than other times. I every month take a little time to reflect on my priorities. I've identified each of the key areas of my life, and they revolve around my life purpose statement. And then I try and set goals and priorities in each of those areas of life. And of course, I have them for the most part. The big ones are there already. It's a matter of secondary, the next tier, so to speak, and other things that I could improve or do better in key areas of my life to be more effective. And then I'll set a resolution or two in those areas. I try not to create a long list,
Yeah,
maybe a couple resolutions to try and be a little more effective in a couple of areas of life.
yeah, yeah. We were talking about this just a minute ago. Just practicing good goal setting, making goals that are measurable and attainable, and um, things that have involve steps so that you can make progress towards your goal. Like be better isn't necessarily a good goal because it's kind of amorphous and hard to get your finger on. So yeah, and then I like that kind of idea of making small adjustments monthly, so that you don't feel like you have to overhaul your whole life when New Year's comes around. Um, any resolutions that you remember from the past that you were able to keep, or any notable failures that you remember?
Well, again, like you're saying, it needs to be specific, measurable,
Yeah,
tangible. The year I bought a 1 year Bible
yeah,
that had the dates in it, where, okay,
yeah, yeah.
on this day of the month, I read
Mm-hmm.
this set of scriptures. That's so easy, so
Yeah.
measurable. And if I missed a day, I just read 2 days worth.
Yep.
I, that worked.
Mm.
The 1 year Bible, having it there by my chair, I get up in the morning with my coffee, and I got the 1 year Bible, and
Mm.
that's as successful as I've ever been because it was so tangible, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Exercise is the worst. I'm always making resolutions regarding exercise. Even last year, I said, okay, I'm going to be on the treadmill 2 days a month. Well, I thought that was specific,
Mm.
but it wasn't specific enough because I wake up Monday morning, no, not today.
Yeah.
And pretty soon it's Thursday and I haven't run once.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I could still get my 2 days in,
Right.
but then I don't. And
Yeah. So it needed to be like I'm gonna get on the treadmill Thursdays and Mondays or
yeah,
whatever
something like
it's gonna
that.
be.
Yep, at 6:15 a.m. I'll be on the
Sure.
treadmill Monday and Thursday.
Yeah.
If I do that, I'm much more likely to have success.
Yeah, and I think that's like we were saying, that's just good. Goal setting doesn't only apply to New Year's resolutions, and I think it's probably helpful to think of our resolutions as just as goals, as
Mhm.
things that we're going to work towards. That being said, our resolutions this year aren't quite standard because 2020 wasn't a standard year. It was a lot different than probably for most of us any year that we've been alive. So how are you going about reflecting on 2020? How does that look for you, and maybe how are you trying to look forward into the future?
Yeah, 2020 was a challenging year. Obviously, for everybody, it was for me personally. I'm just reading on the internet about a pastor in Montana who was describing how depressed he is and how frustrating it's been and how painful it's been. And I mean, that you can repeat that over and over and
Yeah.
over. Obviously, we've got people on different sides of the issue.
Mm-hmm.
And you throw in the political issues that have divided us, and in our church, some staffing issues and other things. It's been a messy year. We've had our disappointments. Our daughter was supposed to get married in the Dominican Republic. That was canceled. We were supposed to take a team to Latvia. That was canceled. I was going to Berlin with a whole group of country leaders in October.
Mm.
Wow, I was excited about that. That got canceled.
Mm.
So in that sense, it's been a disappointing year. And then, of course, just the whole weight of COVID over everybody on the news constantly, and the discouraging numbers and deaths, and then it declines and it rises, and
Yeah.
so yeah, it's not been an easy year that way. So it does. When I was in front of the congregation, I think it was the first service this past Sunday, and just naturally I was going to thank the Lord for the past year and express hope for the next year. And then I realized, thank the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can we actually thank the Lord for the past year?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm grateful for having just been through Habakkuk.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was very helpful to me because he's facing circumstances he didn't understand that were overwhelming to him and crushing, really, the word that had come from the Lord. And yet, when he says that you have ordained this, you have established the Babylonians for your purposes, well, certainly God has his own purposes globally, nationally, personally, for COVID or anything else that comes into our life.
Yeah, of course.
That's the beauty of believing in God, and from my own theological perspective, a sweetly sovereign God from whose hand everything comes. And everything God does is good. Whether it looks good, feels good, on one level, horizontal level, is good. No, I mean, on a horizontal level, it could be evil, like with Joseph.
Right.
Who then said to his brothers, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. That's my confidence.
Yeah.
When you look back at 2020, can I say, thank you, Lord? Well, I say it by faith. Habakkuk says the just shall live by faith, not by. I don't say it by sight,
Right.
because from sight on a very horizontal level, no, it doesn't look like something to be thankful for. But of course, I can say with Habakkuk, though there's no fig on the vines, no cattle on the stalls, I will rejoice in the God of my salvation. God, the Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on the high places. That's our confidence and our hope. And so we can say, thank you, Lord, for the year past, and have hope that that same God is on the throne and going to do good things, eternally good things, personally good things in the year to come.
Yeah, and I think that's great, and I think a year like 2020 really um, it really reveals why we hold on so tightly to God's sovereignty. It's because it's a bedrock in times like this. You know, what are we to do if we don't know if COVID was an accident or on purpose? Um, there's there's no hope if God's not in a real way in control of these things. And us Reformed people probably talk about God's sovereignty too much, but in times like this, it's it's where we can find rest and peace, like Habakkuk's saying. Um, so a common question that I've seen a lot, especially through 2020, Christians to other Christians saying, "Hey, what's God teaching you during this time?" And I think it's we were talking about this before. It's a valuable question, but it's a really hard question when situations are as confusing as they are now. So maybe for those of us asking that question to ourselves, you have any advice, any guidance for us as we ask, what's God teaching me right now, or what did He teach me in 2020?
Sure. I mean, in any life circumstance, that's a valid question to ask personally. What is God doing? What's God teaching me? We know that those whom the Lord loves, He disciplines. Hebrews tells us. Why? I mean, if I discipline my children in my better times as a parent,
Yeah.
when I didn't, do or say something out of anger, but more thoughtfully, I explained to him, well, you knew what was expected of you. Here's where you did not live up to those expectations. Here's what the consequences will be and why. And I think that we can expect it to some degree. We can understand that in our relationship with God when He brings discipline into His life. We can gain some clarity on what some of His purposes might be. Particularly, I mean, it's as simple as, why am I sitting here in Boone waiting for this train, which is a pretty common occurrence. Obviously, God has purposes to develop patience, or other reasons why He's got me stopped behind this train. Even something as simple as that, there are reasons for it. There are purposes in it, and I'll never be perfectly patient, and always need to have the rough edges filed off my impatience, and that's just how it's going to be. And God puts things into my life to remind me and to teach me patience, and that's a good thing. And I can even thank Him, and I can even say God has His purposes in me sitting here, if that's the case. That's maybe a small, silly example, but whatever it is that comes into our life, not always can we see it clearly, but always God has His purposes, and it's a good and right question to ask, especially personally. Once you get to a national and global level, of course, we don't have, I mean, God's working out. We talked about Him riding on that chariot of salvation that runs on the wheels of salvation and judgment, and He's working out these glorious purposes as the drama of redemption is played out in the heavens. Well, I don't have much insight into that.
Right. Yeah.
And why does one politician get elected over another, or why does COVID come, or why does China do what China does?
Yeah.
I don't expect to have answers for those kinds of questions.
Yeah, and that's I think that's a wise thing for all of us to do, is to kind of back down from those questions. Was God enacting judgment through COVID? Yeah, probably. Was He bringing about salvation through COVID? Yeah, probably. But to what degree, and using which people, and those are ways that we can pretty easily get tangled up.
Well, and just the fact that if we started to answer that question, we'd have enough disagreement that it would show us we really don't have the answers.
Yeah, exactly.
And our own, that's where, perspectivalism, comes into play. I mean, we all have our own worldviews, our own perspectives, our own lens through which we view these kinds of issues. And the closer we can get to having them be a biblical lens, the more agreement we'll have, the more insight we'll have, and the more wisdom we'll have. As soon as we start to veer off of the scriptures, we're all going to take our own perspectives and our own stances, and if we put too much stock in that, then that creates division and misunderstanding, and we think we have answers we really don't have. But if we go to the scriptures, that's where we find the answers that we are joyfully able to find, and should give us some encouragement, comfort, and hope in any circumstance.
Yeah. Yeah, we're touching on a topic that's probably beyond the scope of at least this episode. You talked about hope earlier, hope for the new year. And that's great. We all want to have hope. But what exactly is our hope going into the new year? Because I think we're being encountered with a lot of false hopes that this new year could have, but there is a sure hope for Christians. And so what does that look like for you? What are you placing your hope in for 2021?
Well, ultimately, of course, it's that God knows what he's doing, and he has plans for the coming year, just as he did for the last year. What those plans are, I don't know. Do I have some horizontal hope that things will be better? Yeah, vaccine is here, and I just booked a trip for Latvia the end of April today, so we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm hoping I can go,
Yeah.
and trust that'll work out. So, yeah, I'm hoping things change circumstantially. I hope we have an NCAA basketball tournament.
Yeah.
But if not, that's okay. I'll trust God knows what he's doing, and leave it in his hands. And it's not life or death.
Yeah, certainly. Speaking of college basketball, for all you Iowa Hawkeye fans,
Ooh.
We Minnesotans are pretty happy these days after the big upset the Gophers took down the
number
Hawkeyes.
3 at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. On that note of what's our hope for this coming year, when I was thinking about this podcast, my mind went to Ecclesiastes, which is one of my favorite books. I think it's pretty heavily underrated amongst Christians. But chapter 1, verse 9 says, "What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there's nothing new under the sun." So the writer of Ecclesiastes, uses this phrase "under the sun" to talk about kind of things on this fallen world, things in the universe as we know it. And he says, "What has been is what will be." And I think that's maybe an important word for us to remember going into 2021. Will COVID be as big of a deal in 2021 as it was in 2020? Well, probably not. Probably this vaccine is going to do something for the problem. But the same problems, the same kind of root problems that we were dealing with in 2020, they're still going to be there in 2021. COVID just kind of shone a little different light on them than maybe other circumstances have. So our task really is exactly the same in 2021 as it was in 2020, to battle unbelief, to enjoy the life that God has given us instead of the life that maybe we feel like God has given us. And those are kind of eternal problems that are always going to be challenging no matter what the earthly circumstance is. So, of course, it's good to hope for good earthly things like your Latvia trip or the NCAA tournament. But if that's where we're putting our stock, if we're putting our heart in the hands of those things, then we're setting ourselves up for as much pain in 2021 as we felt in 2020.
Sure. As soon as I think of hope, I go to Lamentations.
Mm.
These things I call to mind, therefore I have hope.
Mm.
The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases, his mercies never end, they're new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness.
Mm.
If we set our minds there, hope is a reality that is always our reality, COVID or no COVID,
Yeah.
whatever the circumstances might be. There's always reason for hope.
Yeah, indeed. Well, um, we've given you some good books to go look at. Go take a look at Habakkuk as you're looking back on 2020, Ecclesiastes as you're looking forward to 2021, and I think Lamentations is an appropriate place for us to be now too, as we're still grieving the loss of things that we wish we had in 2020, but having sure hope in the future. That's all I've got for today. Tim, any last words?
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year indeed. All right, thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you next time.